morning, guys. My name's Rishabh. I head brand and content for CubeWell, and I hope you and your families are doing well in these trying times. I'm extremely glad to see all of you who've taken time out to join us here on a Saturday morning. So I'd like to thank you for tuning in. For those of you who are new to Cube, Cube is an investment app focused on busy professionals. This means you get curated investment options handpicked by expert advisors who have a proven track record. Essentially, Cube helps you build a perfect portfolio instead of just selling you everything under the sun. By installing Cube, you've joined people from 10 plus countries and over 100 cities across the globe. This includes founders and working professionals from brands like Amazon, Google, Cars24, Swiggy, etc. Today, we're going to do our first ever Know Your Assets and Advisors session. The goal of the KYA series is to help all of you learn about the investment options offered on the Cube app so you can take informed investment decisions. And what better way to kick off the series than with the newest addition to Cube's curated investment options, asset leasing by Grip. To tell you more about this investment option, we have with us Nikhil Agarwal, founder of Grip Invest, and Cube's head of business, Gaurav Gupta. We'll start with Nikhil, who will tell you about his journey and then walk you through what Grip does, how they pick partners, how they diversify, how risk is mitigated, among other things. After this, Gaurav is going to be the people's voice and ask some spicy questions that were sent in by some of you. We'll also have an open Q&A session at the end where you can send in your questions in case we haven't already covered them during the sessions. So without further ado, let me pass on this imaginary mic to the man of the hour, Nikhil Agarwal. Nikhil, over to you.
Thanks so much, Rishabh. Thanks, Gaurav, for having us and inviting us to this discussion. Very pleased to be speaking about Grip with your user base and giving them our perspective on our business as well as the investment opportunities that Grip creates. Please allow me, first of all, thank you to everyone who's joined on a Saturday morning in these times. As Rishabh said, I do hope that everyone's keeping safe. We are happy to hear that things are improving. We're seeing things improve on the ground, whether it is with our employees, our families, as well as with the companies we're leasing to. But it's, I don't think any of us can let our guard down. I'll kick off the session, as Rishabh said, by talking about Grip. Happy to pause at any point of time, take questions. Obviously, Gaurav's here to moderate that, but very happy to make this an interactive session. Just to introduce Grip, I'm assuming, and some of the names on the panel or some of the names of the users are familiar. So I'm assuming some of you have seen our website, maybe even invested in the Grip product through the Cube website. But allow me to introduce Grip from absolutely scratch and tell you what we do. In our journey to create a alternative investment product, and by alternative investment, basically anything that is non-traditional. It's a very open definition, but anything that is not typically done, like for example, a fixed deposit or stock markets investment, is currently characterized as alternative investing. In our aim to provide that as an interesting, exciting, rewarding option to investors, we created what we believe is a new investment product for retail investors in India. Some of this has been available to large companies. I'm sure many of you have heard of NBFCs or other structured finance companies, even large family offices leasing equipment, but it has never been accessible to everyone at a ticket size that makes sense. Grip created or is the only platform today that offers lease finance as an investment option, which allows investors to earn a fixed income with an attractive risk reward ratio. Investors in this deal or investors in our investment option lease assets such as vehicles, furniture, equipment to companies. I think this distinction is very important. The leasing is only done to companies and not to other individuals. Lease terms are typically 24 to 36 months and allow investors to earn a 20% IRR on a pre-tax basis. Each transaction is structured in the form of pre-agreed rentals that come on a monthly basis, additional security cover in terms of a security deposit, additional protection in the form of escrow accounts, post-dated checks, first charge on revenue, and many other measures. And finally, I'll draw a distinction here, but on Grip's platform, the minimum investment size is 20,000, while the offering made on Cube is about 1 lakh rupees. And there's a very important reason for that differentiation that I'll come to when I talk about diversification. taking a step back, try to understand why we created a product. I think it would have been easy for us to start our journey by probably selling other products and becoming a distribution platform. But when we looked at the products that are available from an alternative investment perspective and mapped it against what investors were telling us was the most important criteria, we found a huge gap. Okay. And I'll spend a few minutes on the slide because I think it's the crux of our business. On the left-hand side, we have listed some of the options that many of you may have tried. I'm sure most of you know about. And on the top column, we have listed the criteria that investors told us, and we ourselves felt, because we are ourselves are very much our own target audience, on what is important from investment, or at least alternative investment. The first one was a ticket size that allowed you to access, right? This is something that you're trying new and that you're trying from a diversification perspective. I'll be the first one to tell you that alternative investment should never be a majority part of your portfolio, right? Global fund advisors are talking about 15 to 20% of your total wealth going to alternative investments. And hence, for you to be able to experience a new product, the ticket size needs to be accessible. The second is that the risk profile has to be a medium risk profile. If anyone tells you that an alternative investment product is no risk, is low risk, I think that's a false premise. The nature of the product by itself is a medium risk profile, right? And there's a range within that. It's up to the investor to educate and to think about how they think about that risk. I'll educate you on how we think about leasing risk. The third one, which was incredibly important to investors, was having a physical security, having an asset-backed investment. Okay? And this is where a majority of the options today fell short. Second last is the return profile. It has to be attractive for you to be able to take that higher risk. And finally, there has to be an ease of exit. You cannot be stuck with having something that is dependent on a IPO or a last mile acquisition, which makes the exit or the liquidity very difficult. A preferred product to us would tick all the boxes. Unfortunately, the products that we saw in the market always missed something, right? Just a couple of examples. If you think of revenue-based financing or bill discounting, they're not asset-backed. There's no physical security. If we think of fractional real estate, the transaction size is 25 lakh rupees or 50 lakh rupees to start with, which makes it difficult to access and diversify. At the same time, real estate is difficult to exit, right? The market, exiting a large transaction can always have its own complications. As a result, the first step that we did in starting Grip was to try to identify this option. One of the things that came out from our personal experience, Ashish, Vivek, and I, the three co-founders at Grip, we all come from a company called Chalo, which is a mobility startup and today India's largest private operator of buses. That experience at Chalo taught us that majority of companies are looking to scale by being asset light, right? They don't want to have the asset on their balance sheet. Ola is a classic example. I don't even have to, I think, explain it to anyone on this call. But if you think of something like an Amazon Web Services, for those of you who don't know, Amazon Web Services provides cloud computing services. Amazon is one of the largest provider of this service globally. None of us, because of this service, own on-premise servers. Neither our homes nor our offices have on-premise servers. We just use this on demand on a subscription basis. At the same time, companies like Amazon don't need to own the servers either. They don't need to own the warehouses, the cooling stations, the warehousing racks, nothing. They're simply the computing layer. And hence there is a third party who is owning the asset. Furlenco is an example that many of you know, but you can keep drawing this example on and on. If we just look at how our lives have changed in terms of how we're consuming goods and services, you will see how much micro leasing you're doing on a daily basis. And if that is a mega trend that is impacting all of us personally and the companies we are part of, there is a huge opportunity to go contrarian and say ownership of assets will create a huge financial return and can be incredibly rewarding. Okay? Grip built its premise on the fact that leasing is going to expand. Companies are going to be able to pay higher amount of rent because these assets that they're leasing are revenue generating. And this can be built into an incredibly attractive financial product for investors. I'm going to marry these two themes together on this slide, right? I think it's important always for any business to work that everyone wins. the supply of capital, which is the investors, as well as the demand, which is the companies that we are leasing to. And I'm going to link it back to what you told you about what investors believe are useful. If you think about the leasing product, you're leasing to a company, you are able to receive returns on a monthly basis. You get security deposit. You're allowed to structure escrow payments. For all of these reasons, you're significantly able to reduce the risk of the investment you're making. Obviously, there is a physical security that is in place, and that allows you to have something to go back on in the case of a default. The returns that we've been able to structure are incredibly attractive, right? It's now been almost a year of operations, and all of our transactions have been 20% plus on an IRR basis. And the exit by itself is very natural because every month you get a lease payment. Right? For these reasons, we believe that leasing met the requirements of investors while also meeting the requirements of the broader industry. I think another way to present this is to just talk about the disintermediation or the cost of money at the investor side versus the cost of returns that companies are paying. If you think about the fixed deposits you're putting in a bank today, at best you're earning 6%. Right? The banks and NBFCs are circulating that money, obviously reducing risk for you as an investor, and providing it to companies at 14 to 18%. The question we asked ourselves, to summarize when we started Grip was, this is a difference of 1,000 basis points, right? 4 to 14%. Is that a delta that you are, as an investor, will find attractive, given that leasing is a risk managed asset class? Right? I'm sure many of you would have heard the same hypothesis for other products, right? The same arbitrage. But the question we ask is leasing even more attractive from a risk to reward ratio because of the way a lease deal is structured? And we have spoken about these points before. It's asset backed. You're directly accessing the company. You're leasing to corporates. You have a security deposit, and you get monthly returns. Okay. And this is the hypothesis behind which we started with. Couple of slides, and then I'll stop for any questions. What we do at Grip is not simply to allow any company to come and list on our platform and make that deal available to investors. We manage the end-to-end journey from selection of a company who is interested in leasing, negotiation of terms, identification of investors, purchase of the assets, and then working month on month with the lessee to ensure that you get timely returns. Grip hence provides a complete solution with respect to this journey. Okay. Our own financial returns, and I'll come to that slide as well, are linked to the entire process being completed, the entire life cycle being completed for any investment. Grip does not earn revenues upfront, right? It earns revenues as you make money as an investor. And that ties into our philosophy of managing this process end to end for you. Finally, before I can conclude, this is the leasing portfolio that we have built today. And there are a few points that I want to take away from it. We've been fortunate to be able to scale fairly quickly. And in the last 10 months, built to about a 40 crore leasing portfolio. What has been exciting for us is the ability to work with almost 30 different companies to whom we have leased, right? So there is no significant concentration of risk to any one company. As you look at these names, I'm sure that 70 to 80% of the names are very recallable to you. You would have heard about their business, seen about them, even used their products, right? There's a Blue Tokai here, there's an Uber logo here, Ashok Leyland, there's a Fab Ali. These are companies that you probably have interacted with or someone in your family's interacted with. These are also companies that are sitting on the portfolio of some of the best investors in India, both from a debt and equity perspective. There are companies who take money from HDFC Bank. For example, we have leased Maruti cars, where the company is also taking loan from HDFC to purchase them. We're also currently launching a deal. We've launched a deal yesterday night for ambulances, where HDFC Bank provides borrowing for it. So all the companies that we lease to are actually getting access to formal sector finance from other very credible sources. And we become one additional source of capital for them when it comes to their CapEx requirements and converting that CapEx into OpEx. The assets that we have leased to them are also mentioned on this page. There is obviously a diversity of it, which gives great comfort to investors. However, there is a certain amount of focus that we have brought into few asset categories where our strengths lie and where we can do more to protect the returns and the risk of the investor. One is mobility, given our own experience, and the second is a focus on warehousing, not the warehouse itself, but what goes inside the warehouse. Okay. I'll stop here and maybe happy to take any questions, Gaurav, either from you or from the investors.
I see we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A section, some in the chat. A lot of questions I see may get covered in the list of questions Gaurav already has. And Gaurav actually went out and picked out some of the tougher questions that we received via email. So I'd say, Gaurav, why don't you take over now and we'll have a little chat between you and Nikhil. Whatever questions are left post that, we can pick them up from the Q&A and chat towards the second half, right?
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Rishabh. Good morning, everyone. I hope all of you are safe and sound. And thanks a lot, Nikhil, for such a simple explanation on, I'd say, overall asset leasing and about GRIP as well. But guess what? We would like to know a lot more, specifically around risk, partner selection, many more areas. I'm going to cover that. I see, interestingly, what Rishabh just mentioned. There are some bunch of questions which are going to be covered already in the set I'm going to ask, and the remaining ones we'll pick right after once I'm done with the questions we already have. The questions I'm going to ask you are from our existing, I'll say 50 odd early adopters from Cube who have already put in nearly 1.5 crore in the last 30-40 days itself. Some of the questions we have listed down are from our risk and compliance team, which we have asked you in the past, while we were doing the integration, pre-integration, and before we inducted GRIP into Cube. And some of the questions we have got via email from the audience already when we requested them to share some of the questions in advance. So I hope you are ready. I'm going to ask you some tough questions. So let's start with asset partners. How do you go about it, right? How do you choose which asset leasing partners you work for? What are the factors do you take into consideration before choosing them?
Sure. I'm just going to use some slides for answering some of these questions if I have them ready. So just allow me to move a couple of pages. I think this is probably the most important part of GRIP, right? We are incredibly concerned about the quality of assets. And I also saw a couple of questions about the performance of the track record of GRIP from an NPA perspective and delinquency perspective. I'll try to link those questions. Till now, we have not had a single delay in payment, no delinquency, no requirement for asset recovery. All of our companies continue to remain incredibly healthy. In fact, we also follow a practice of doing a monthly review on the financial performance of the companies, getting access to their performance, cash flow statements, P&L, speaking to their founders to understand where the business is going. And that has allowed us to have great visibility on how they're performing even during a tough economic environment like this. On the deal selection, there are two separate criteria for us. One is a threshold criteria. What that means is if these 5 criteria are not met, a company does not even go into our credit process. Okay? First of all is a focus in our core sectors, predominantly, as I mentioned, mobility, electronics, and furniture. The reason to do that is we have a better understanding of those business models and assets, and hence we are able to take a more qualified view of the investment being made. We are definitely looking to expand into other categories, especially medical equipment, but that will be based on either building in-house or external capability and understanding of those sectors. The second is that the asset must be a revenue generating asset. And this is very important because two things happen when the asset is revenue generating. First is that that's the last asset to be cut off from the company, right? Because you're generating revenue on it. If I was to, Gaurav, if I was to take the example of Cube and we were to lend you chairs and tables, that would be the first thing you would get rid of in a bad time, right? But if we were to lease Cube something that is critical for your operations, you will make sure that that's the last thing. The second is that because they're revenue generating, you're also happy to pay higher rentals, okay? And that increases the returns for investors. Third, we want to make sure that the asset life, every asset has an economic life. For a vehicle, it may be 5 years. For furniture, it may be X years. For something like an iron alloy warehousing rack, it's 15 years. We want to make sure that the lease we do is for significantly smaller than the asset life. That's an important criteria for us. The other threshold is to make sure that there's an institutional investor behind the leasing. This ensures corporate governance as well as the ability to provide equity support in a downturn. And finally, the asset must generate unit economics. So while the company as a whole may be not profitable today, but each unit, any asset deployed must make money. Okay? From a diligence perspective, I would say majority of the things are very standard, but very typical of what any credit organization would do, which includes looking back at financials, 3-year financials, 18-month MISs, business plans, looking at their industry position, doing reference check on the founders. I think there are two things that I'll spend more time talking about. One is because we are leasing to companies which are sometimes unprofitable, it's very important for us to understand what is their runway. How many months of cash do they have in the business to be able to support, assuming that they can't break even in that point of time. For us, we have set that threshold as 18 months. Okay? If a company does not have runway for the next 18 months, we do not lease to them. 18 months is a critical milestone because in that time, 70 to 80% of the investor's capital gets returned. Okay? And that significantly reduces the chance of a default. The other difference that we have is that we prefer leasing to companies in the B2B business. Right? For example, currently the ambulance deal we're talking about, those ambulances are placed with an Apollo hospital or a Dr. Reddy's and are backed by 3 to 5 year agreements between the ambulance operator and the hospital. Okay? These kind of contracts add a further degree of confidence to our process, and we diligence these ultimate contracts as well. The last difference is we also do a diligence on the asset we are purchasing and the OEM from whom we are buying. Because we work with so many companies, we get to pick on their intelligence of which assets perform better and whether we should be purchasing those assets or not. Okay. On the right hand side of this page, I'll not go into it, but we have some credit enhancements that we also structure. I've spoken about them earlier, so in the interest of time, I'll not cover that.
Yeah, thanks, Nikhil. That's quite comprehensive. Yeah, but even after, let's say, your partner selection, what we understand, and there's a thumb rule of investing also, the diversification, right? So how does that work? How do I get the diversification when I'm, let's say, investing via Cube as an example, or what are the kind of different leases and deals which are there under the wrapper?
Yep, I think this is the most exciting part of what we have created as a very unique proposition for Cube users, right? And Gaurav, since our first discussion almost 9 months back, I think we first spoke in September 2020. Cube has obviously monitored Grip's progress over the period of time, but I believe that it's critical for Cube as a policy that any asset provides diversification to its users. One of the rules that we had agreed to with Cube before launching was that any investment would go into 10 different assets, at least 10 different assets and 10 different leases, right? We've been very happy to be able to construct that for Cube users, and this investment option or this diversification option is not available anywhere else, including on the Grip platform. So it's an exclusive thing that we do for Cube. If you come back to the transaction size, and I'll talk about the assets, while the minimum transaction size on the Cube on the Grip platform is 20,000 rupees for a single deal, on Cube, if you invest 1 lakh rupees, you get diversified into 10 assets, which means your minimum ticket size per investor per deal is only 10,000 rupees, right? And hence one other additional benefit for Cube investors. On this slide, I have listed the 2 different schemes that are available on Cube for Grip. The first one was a 37-month leasing option and then a 25-month leasing option. We have listed down the deals, the leases and the assets where that money has gone. So you mentioned 1.5 crore rupees. That 1.5 crore rupees has got equally divided between these companies for these assets, right? I think it's very easy to see that the companies are in completely different sectors. Okay, there is a mix of B2B, B2C contracts. There is a mix of everything from warehousing to vehicles, IoT devices, and I think that provides a great measure for investors to have a further risk protection.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay, let's come to the interesting part of any investment, risk, right? I've got a bunch of questions on risk, so I'm going to club a few of them together and then going to ask you as a set. So the first question I have is, to some extent you've covered it, but how do you mitigate risk? And have you seen any impact because of COVID?
Sure. We have not seen any impact because of COVID yet. Um, the reason being, I think twofold. One is the companies that we are leasing to, we've always made sure that they have cash balance for 18 months, right? And because we monitor it month on month, we know that they have cash to be able to pay us. Also, because we're doing revenue generating assets, we're seeing our assets already deployed. So we're not seeing a challenge. Their utilization may have reduced, but these assets haven't changed. The other thing, as a company which started in COVID in June 2020, maybe we started the business with the mindset that we have to think about this as a reality. A lot of our businesses or a lot of the companies that we lease to actually get benefited in a pandemic. It's a weird thing to say, but if you think about last mile delivery, it actually increases in the pandemic. Warehousing continues to operate, right? So a lot of our businesses are not impacted in a negative way, and because they have B2B contracts with minimum guarantees, that adds as a further protection. In terms of how we look at risk, I think the first thing to talk about is team, right? And please ignore the top three people. I think those are the co-founders. But more importantly, if you think about the guys at the bottom of the page, Siddharth and Abhishek. Siddharth is responsible for credit management, right, and for credit assessment. He comes with 10 years of experience working with CRISIL, Kotak Mahindra Corporate Bank as a credit underwriter, and then with Clicks Capital, which was GE's NBFC. And Siddharth and his team is responsible for diligencing all the companies that we lease to. His background of having done deals for the last 10 years obviously gives us a great expertise in understanding credit risk. The second thing that we have done proactively is to build a process for asset management and recovery. Right? Abhishek and his team get involved from the time that an asset is deployed for insurance, recovery, resale. And we have built the process using technology tools to make sure that that is a more effective process than would normally happen. The other way that we like to communicate our risk mitigation is maybe via this, I would say that the life cycle of a lease transaction, right? And I'll just walk from left to right on this slide. The first step obviously is to diligence the company that we're leasing to, right? And the blue bar indicates the investment value made, which is 100% of the lease or the asset amount. The first security measure comes in the form of a deposit, typically 10% of the asset amount that comes to the investors as soon as the money is deployed. The second measure is that we receive returns on a monthly basis. I have currently divided them into 3 blocks of 6 months each, but it is actually on a monthly basis that the returns come. Assuming, let's take the scenario of an event of default after 18 months. Before that, an investor has already received 70% of the lease payments, right? So in 50% of the lease term, 70% of the lease payments are already obtained. What we think about as an event of default risk and mitigation measures is how do we recover the balance 25 to 40% to ensure that the investor's capital and the returns are protected. And for that, we have 4 steps that we're working on as a strategy. First of all, you do a settlement with the lessee, right? You say, your business is shut down for whatever reason. Can we settle and recover X amount of value? All of our contracts today have a lock-in and are built in with the provision that if the company was to terminate the lease ahead of time, they have to pay the compensatory amount to the lessee, to the investor. Okay, so that is already built into our agreements. The company is also responsible for maintenance, repair, and loss of the asset. The second is to repossess the asset. As I mentioned, Abhishek's team is responsible for that. Think about a Maruti car, right, or an ambulance. These are very easy to dispose of in a secondary market. Third is that because we buy assets from the same OEM, we've also entered into buyback arrangements with them to procure the asset and to be able to recover value. And finally, which I think is the most interesting part, we have multiple leasees staying the same asset from us, which means if one leasee shuts down, we have the ability to redeploy within our ecosystem, and that adds as a further protection. So that's how we think about risk mitigation. It would be, as Gaurav, you started the question with, it would be naive of us to think that we will not have a default. Okay, we believe that we will have a default. And hence, that is what we are protecting ourselves for by taking these measures.
Interesting. So, let's go down this route and understand. Let's say, if there's a default on in a couple of companies, or if there is a delay in payments, right? What happens? How does it impact my investment returns and all of that?
I think in the case of specifically talking about Cube, for a and I think about default as a probability factor, right?
Yeah.
So for a significant impact to happen to a Cube investor's returns, 20% of the leases have to go bad. They have to go bad within 18 months, right?
Okay.
And then there has to be no ability to recover value. So 3 events have to happen simultaneously, okay, at a very large magnitude. So 20% of bad leases within 18 months and no recovery of asset. Okay. If you look at the conditional probability, right, the multiplication of these probability of all the events happening together is very, very low, right? Okay. And to that extent, while it's difficult to quantify, in my view, that probability of all 3 happening together is somewhere between 5 to 7% for a material event to happen. And that's how we think about it, from an investor to potentially lose not the capital but the profit that they're making.
Interesting. So diversification is playing a huge role here.
Diversification, and one of the thing on credit which we have learned is there is no one measure that can protect 100% of the returns of the investor.
Yeah.
It doesn't function like that. You have to build 4 or 5 measures to ultimately combat it, and everything is probabilistic. Then if 3 of those 5 measures go right, you're good. Okay? And we are trying to do everything in our power to keep increasing those measures and the execution capability with respect to any of these measures.
Interesting. Right. Since we are talking about runway, I have an interesting question for you. What if Grip shuts down tomorrow? What happens to my investments?
Sure. So let me first give you confidence on why Grip will not shut down, and then I'll also tell you what happens if it happens, because we should always think of that possibility. We haven't shared this even outside the domain, but Grip is already an equity funded company. But earlier this week, we raised an additional 20 crores in equity for Grip itself. And that gives us obviously tremendous amount of tremendous amount of growth for our own business. And investors should take comfort in the fact that several well-known venture capitalists have backed the business and are providing capital for our growth. But let's assume Grip does shut down. What we have done is that each transaction is structured through a separate SPV, a special purpose vehicle. That special purpose vehicle will continue to exist irrespective whether Grip exists or not. Okay. Vivek and I are designated partners. Think of it as a concept of directors of that LLP, of that SPV, in our personal capacity, and we have personally invested. So alongside Cube investors at the same terms, in fact, I was the first investor on Cube for this transaction. Alongside the Cube investors at the same terms, our interests are absolutely aligned, right? And even if Grip was to shut down, that SPV continues. All the lease transactions exist between that SPV and the lessee and the companies, and hence it will operate completely independently of Grip.
Very interesting. Okay, let's continue this topic around structure. How does it work? I mean, structure, sure. Who takes the responsibility? You mentioned SPV, you mentioned LLP. How does it work?
What happens is that, and I'll answer this question from a Cube perspective. All Cube investors become part of a limited liability partnership, which is the special purpose vehicle. This LLP signs lease agreements for the 10 transactions that happen. The assets belonging to these transactions are held within this SPV. Okay? And hence the physical ownership lies with the SPV. Okay? On a monthly basis, the SPV gets lease income against these transactions, and those returns are distributed to investors. Because the SPV owns the assets, it also is able to take advantage of depreciation, right? And reduce the tax liability that arises from the lease income. Purchase of asset also creates an input tax credit, which is used to offset the output GST as against the lease transaction. And those benefits are also passed on to the investor. One of the reasons to choose the LLP is that distribution from the LLP to the investor is tax exempt. There is no concept of dividend distribution tax or tax in the hands of the investor. And hence this creates a single tax incidence. There is no double taxation to the investor. What the investor receives is hence post-tax returns. And they do not need to file any tax at their end. They're required to make a declaration under ITR 3, but there is no requirement for them to pay any money. It's just declaring that this is an income that they have earned on a post-tax basis. That is the structure for all of our lease transactions. No, and we talked about the 10 transactions that are there for Cube users. No other transaction sits as part of this LLP, and hence it is completely siloed from any other risk.
Interesting. You have actually covered one of my topic, which is taxation. Thanks for that. You want to add anything on taxation? Because we talk about pre-tax, post-tax from GRIP perspective, and especially on Cube, we offer, project it very differently, right? Do you want to highlight any of that?
I think the one question that's come many times is people saying, why is there a difference between what GRIP shows and Cube shows? And I want to give confidence that there is actually no difference. Whatever are the returns on GRIP website for a product is exactly the same returns on the Cube website. The only difference is that on the GRIP website, we show both the headline rate is the pre-tax rate. Investors are also shown the post-tax rate. In the Cube website, it is the same deal, except that the post-tax rate is shown. The other reason why there's a difference is because the Cube deal is a combination of 10 deals. And hence, sometimes you may go on a GRIP website and see a very high IRR. But that IRR also comes to you as part of this combination, but it may not be as visible. But I want to give assurance that there is no difference between what is available on the GRIP platform and the Cube platform in terms of returns.
Got it. Last but not the least, another interesting question. What's your skin in the game? What's GRIP's skin in the game? What happens in case of default?
Yeah. To me, these are three things in how we have created skin in the game. 2% of the total AUM, total leasing AUM today, is invested by the GRIP team on a personal basis. Right? Vivek, Ashish, myself, our teams have invested. I think on a side note, the beauty of building a product which our own team uses is fantastic. Right? It also gives us so much more feedback on how we can do things better. But everyone at GRIP invests in our deals, not because we necessarily force them to invest. There's no such force, but because of their personal choice. The second is that we don't take any upfront fees from investors. We charge 2% fees on a monthly basis from the lease income earned. And hence, in a 36-month or a 37-month lease transaction, our 2% comes including at the 37th month. If the transaction was to not create income, it would also not create income for us. And finally, I think the most important is we are here to build a 1,000 crore business, a 10,000 crore business on leasing, service 50 to 100,000 investors. We are very, very early in our journey, and we have tremendous reputational risk if investors were not to make returns, if there was to be a significant default on the platform. And hence, we are most cautious about a sustainable growth rate in business and ensuring return of value to investors.
Yeah, that's useful, Nikhil. Thanks. I've got very interesting questions already listed here. So let me probably pick let me ask you.
Do you mind if I pick a couple, Gaurav, that I found?
Yeah, go for it, please. Yeah, it would help. Yeah.
Kailash, you asked a question about why Ashok Leyland, right? And I think this is a very important question because we'll see many such transactions on the platform. Companies like Ashok Leyland, and there's also a Tata Steel logo here. They don't think, again, everyone's mind has changed. They don't think of a physical asset. They think of it as a service. Okay. When you think about Uber and Ola, just if you close your eyes and think about Ola and Uber, you think about the journey. You think about the trip and the quality of service. when you take a plane ticket, you don't think about the asset, you think about the entire service. Even companies are thinking about, I am getting a service which includes hardware, software, AMC, right? And I am paying for that service. In the case of Ashok Leyland, what we have leased are electric charging stations, which are used for Ashok Leyland's bus operations in Ahmedabad on a captive basis. Ashok Leyland doesn't think that I am getting a charging station. They think of it, I am getting electricity, literally like a fuel station. I'm getting petrol service to me when I need it. Okay? And for that reason, because it is not core to Ashok Leyland, they're very happy to take it on lease, right? And again, pay a much higher rate than they would typically pay for an asset. I think this important distinction in the mindset of people, companies and individuals is creating this huge opportunity, which is allowing us to create such attractive returns. If you think about, again, this situation, Ashok Leyland can take financing at 8, 9, 10% from banks, but they do it for some of their, I think, the assets that they themselves manage. When it comes to these assets where they're getting a service, they're very happy to pay more. Okay. There's another question from Yashika. You're absolutely right. There are assets which will get outdated. And what happens in the case of those investments? Some of these assets are, for example, electric bikes, laptops, chargers in our portfolio. And I think we absolutely recognize this. And hence, one of the things that we've done is to keep very, very short lease terms. Okay? Some of these assets will get defunct over a period of, say, 2 to 3 years, right? Our lease terms are shorter than 2 years, or are exactly 2 years, to make sure that we don't have to deal with redundancy of assets. We also know, and we purposely picked assets in the mobility field which have a high technology impact, because we understand these assets more. We know that where the industry is going, both in terms of cost and technology, and how likely these assets are to survive. At the same time, we are building further risk mitigation. To give you an example, in the case of electric bikes, majority of our electric bikes are from Hero Electric, and Hero Electric has guaranteed us a buyback of the bikes whenever we want to return them. Okay, that creates a protection for the investor. In the case of electric batteries, we are working with several companies who do second life of battery. They're able to use the batteries for some other purpose, and we have partnered with them to sell the assets to them in the case that something goes wrong. Right. So these are some of the measures that we're taking and how we think about this. Yeah. Gaurav, please stop me in case you have a, if you any question you want to pick up.
No. Feel free. I mean, I think this is a easier structure. You can answer and club the questions together. Yeah.
Good. Yashika, Bounce. I think there's a tremendous amount of negative news on Bounce. At least from what I understand, what we get on a monthly basis, they are not going out of business. In fact, they are they have about 300 crores of cash on the balance sheet. That said, our leasing transaction with Bounce is almost coming to an end, and we have been able to return money to investors and give them the returns back. So we have not had a challenge with Bounce at all. Okay. Ashmit, I understand that you have a challenge with respect to becoming a partner as per ICAI rules. I think that has, we have seen this in a few cases with examples. One of the ways people have done that is to have someone in their family take up the responsibility of being a partner. But that is obviously a personal choice. I can understand if this is a limitation. Unfortunately, today, this is the only structure that we offer to investors. There is no name to this investor, but I'll answer the question about having information on taxation and declarations. Each investor, as you invest, will obviously get also access to the portfolio page on Grip. If you have already made an investment through Cube on Grip, you will be able to log into Grip's website and see a portfolio section where the documents for your transaction are already made available, and we're constantly increasing the disclosures that are available. Anything that you need from a taxation perspective will also be provided to you at the end of the financial year. Since Cube Investments only started in FY22, currently tax declarations for this will only be provided towards the end of the financial year and not currently, but you will have access to these in a very readable, a very easy format, completely available for you anytime you require them to be able to make your filings. How is GRIP different from an ILFS model? I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer this question, or maybe you can elaborate on the question. ILFS obviously does many things, including leasing. Leasing by itself is a very commonplace model. There are lots of companies that do it. They may do it for different sectors and different industries. I don't think that we are doing anything different in terms of leasing as a product, right? What we are trying to do is create it more from an investor's perspective that is attractive, but the product by itself is same. If you could maybe elaborate on the question, I'm happy to throw more light on it. Is the entire security deposit passed back on day 0? That's correct. We pass on the entire security deposit to the investor. We do not keep it for GRIP. Okay. I think last couple of questions. Okay, the same question twice on the competitor to GRIP, right? I would say that any alternative investment option, and all the users on this call have access to many alternative investment options through Cube, including P2P. And there are many other options that are available in the market and getting created in the market. I think all of them in a way are competitors to us, because we are all seeking a piece of your wallet, of your investment portfolio. We hope that we are creating a product, we are creating a platform, we're providing disclosure, we are servicing you in a way that is better than other platforms. But that's how we think about competition. There is no other platform today that is providing leasing as a product. And to that extent, we don't have competition, but we are one of the alternative finance options that are available. In my view, we're at a very, very exciting time for fintech and for alternative investments. It is amazing to see the growth in everything from Zerodha to WazirX. I'm sure Cube is seeing, different kind of traction for US stocks. And all of these things are incredibly exciting at a time for us to be building this business as investors seek more diversification. We are trying to do our best in providing you one such option. So Gaurav, those are the questions that I could see. Let me know if I missed something.
I'm just quickly browsing. I think there's another question on LLP details, so you can answer, but the short answer is yes, this information is available as the part of the LLP. Once you invest, you get this agreement and you can read all the details there.
Yep.
There's a very specific question from Ashmit, because I know Ashmit is a CA, but I know it's very, 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 very specific. If you like to address, or we can address it offline. He wants to know. You can read Ashmit's question.
I did, and I understand that concern. Maybe we can talk it offline and provide some of the CAs what options they have chosen alternatively to invest through the platform.
Fair
happy to take it.
Fair enough. But I'm happy to update you that Ashmit actually is one of the early Cube user, and he has a family account, so I'm sure he has a way.
Okay, sure.
So
perfect.
I have a question from Kaushal, but honestly, I couldn't understand the question.
Should I just turn Kaushal's mic on and maybe he can come online and ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Hey, thanks, Gaurav. So the question may not make too much sense, but it was a follow-up to the previous question. So it was about the skin in the game discussion that was being asked. So I know there's a note about like you'll have been doing it, and there's some investments coming in from some GRIP employees, the founders. But is there a commitment? Is it in writing on what percentage there will be consistently? Because I know the 2% smaller, I'm assuming an LLP formation formality that was mentioned earlier, right? So the question is really about what is that skin in the game is really the big one I'm trying to get a sense of, and the written commitment towards that effect.
Sure. Question. So today it is 2%. It is not an LLP formation formality. In fact, LLP formation formality is just 5,000 rupees per partner. Our investment obviously is significantly higher than that 5,000 rupees investment. We would like to keep our commitment at 2% going forward, till at least we are able to build to a 100 crore portfolio, which is 2.5 times of where we are. I think beyond that, and I'll be very transparent about this, it may be difficult for us as individuals to keep supporting that. What we are looking for doing is accessing capital from the GRIP company itself to continue making that commitment, as well as certain lines of commitment that we are taking from people like Yes Bank, who are bankers, or other partners, to be able to keep that commitment of a general partner in all our transactions. More importantly, it is not that we invest in selective deals, we invest in all deals.
Okay. Am I still unmuted?
Yes.
Yeah, Kaushal. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so actually just exactly that. So I think to be clear, so there's going to be a 2% commitment for all deals right now, but that as you get past 100 crores, there'll be 2% from. So yeah, it's not about from the founders or employees. It's more about what is the skin in the game for GRIP as an entity. And so what I'm hearing is that GRIP as a company would then have 2% skin in the game for all deals going forward also. Is that correct?
So if you think about it, GRIP already has a 2% commitment in one way, because our fees is linked to the deal, right? So our 2% fees is already a 2% commitment. In addition to that, currently we have a 2% investment commitment. Right? So we have a 4% commitment in that sense. Till the time we reach 100 crore, that commitment remains 4%. After we reach 100 crores, the fees commitment remains 2%. But while we haven't taken a definite decision on it, it will definitely be above 1%. Right? But it will not be from us as individuals. It will be from GRIP as a company.
Thanks.
I can give you a guarantee that it will be above 1%. But you can understand that beyond a certain amount of capital, it is challenging for us to obviously deploy money.
Thanks.
Thanks. Rishabh, we've got two more hands up. Maybe you can.
Yeah, I see Nivedan and Arun with their hands up. So I'm going to start with Arun. I'm just going alphabetically, guys. Arun, you're unmuted if you have a question you want to ask.
Yeah. So I couldn't understand what Kaushal's question was, and I couldn't see him because his question was very, very important. So is this video being recorded? So I can then have a look at in the video, and I want to discuss with my chartered accountant. I'm a senior citizen and I'm very much interested. But before I take a decision, I want to, discuss the whole thing with my chartered accountant.
Yes, Arun. For everyone who registered on the CUBE website for the session, there will be a video that will be sent to you. And for any one-to-one questions, of course, you can always connect to us, connect to your wealth coach, or just email us at feedback@BankOnCube. Nivedan, I'm going to move to you. I am assuming you have a question as well. You've been unmuted, Nivedan. If you have a question, please go ahead. Okay, I don't think Nivedan had a question. There's sometimes accidental raise of hands. So I'm just lowering all hands.
No, he's here.
He's here? Okay.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah. I can hear you, Nivedan.
Okay, I think I was just figuring out how to unmute on the
Sure.
webinar. But anyway, so I think I heard out that part of bounce, which was a very brief mention. But I would like to understand this a little bit as a case study as to, when something of this sort happens, where a company is going under, right? What scenario exactly happened with bounce, especially in context to GRIP? And then, what were the other paths it could have taken? That would be a more hypothetical discussion for any future possibilities. So would you be able to address that a bit more in detail?
So Nivedan, if you don't mind, I would like to club a couple of more questions on your behalf and investors' behalf. So there are two more questions, Nikhil, which have come up, and you can club all of them. See, you spoke about certain probabilities of if things go south, and you also mentioned specifically via Cube, if 20% of the deals go down, still what is the protection which is there? I'm clubbing one question from Manish, and Manish has said if we invest 10 lakh rupees, and the risk you briefly mentioned is 5 to 7%, you hinted somewhere, how much is he likely to lose in the worst case scenario? So all these things are in a way, you can club together and answer.
Mine is more around the process a little bit, just to clarify that like, in terms of priorities, for example, the lenders get it first and so on. There's a certain priority to who gets the payment first, kind of a thing. From that angle, I would want to know more.
Sure.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. So I think, Nivedan, first of all, in case of because the asset is owned by us, right? On behalf of the investors who own it in the SPV, no lender has claim to the asset. No other lender in the company has claim to the asset. A lender only has claim to the assets that are owned by the company itself, by Bounce itself. If Bounce, hypothetically, was to go under, the assets that are leased to Bounce will continue to belong to the investors. And the first right on those assets, or the right on the assets, the highest right on the assets belong to the investors. Now let's play out a few scenarios and try to make them as bad as possible from an investor's perspective. Right?
Yeah.
Let's assume that, while we'll talk about Bounce, I really want to specify that this is hypothetical, all right? Because this is not what has actually happened, but I'm trying to create a worst case scenario here. Our transaction with Bounce was in October 2020. And the reason for doing the transaction, despite the economic environment and despite the reduction in mobility trips, was the availability of cash on Bounce balance sheet. I think all of us know, and there's public information, that Bounce is a very well-funded company. They also have the support of some of the largest investors in India. Right? Between October to now, it's been about 7 months. Right? So an investor would have received 7 months of repayment plus the security deposit for this transaction. This was a 3-year transaction, and which means basically close to 35 to 40% of the investors' returns would have come back. Investors' capital would have come back. Okay. Now let's assume that Bounce closes the company. Grip's team, on behalf of the investors, would go to recover the assets. Okay. For the purpose of the discussion, let's assume that we gave 100 bikes on lease to Bounce. Okay. We go to collect them. And Yashika, you have also asked a question in this direction. Let's assume for a minute that we are only able to recover 60% of bikes. 40% of bikes we can't recover only. The condition is so bad, whatever it's, couldn't identify, while every bike has a GPS tracker, we couldn't find it. Okay? Those 60 bikes, now we have a few options. One is we can go and sell them back to the OEM. As I mentioned to you, we have buyback arrangements for certain assets, especially electric bikes with OEMs. We can separate out the bike and the battery and go and sell the battery to our battery sharing network partners like a Battery Smart or a Shell. Or we can go and take this asset and give it to Vogo, who is also our leasing partner and operates in the same market as Bangalore. Okay. Let us assume that these 60% of bikes, through all these combinations, we're only able to recover 50% of value. Okay. Even then, 50% of value is lost, right? Which means that you get 16 to 50, 30% of value back. You've got 35 to 40% already got in the form of lease payments and security deposit, and you got another 30% here. You got 75% of your value back, assuming Bounce defaulted in 6 months. You recovered only 60% of assets, and even after recovering 60% of assets, you could only recover 50% of value. Okay, despite all the measures taken. In this case, the investor has had a loss of 25%. Because in the case of Cube, this deal would only be one of 10 deals. That amount is not 25%, but it's actually 2.5%, right? Because each asset is 10%, and hence this accounts for only 10% of your platform, and hence 10% to 25% is 2.5%, right? The question Manish you asked is, assuming one more deal goes bad like this, again a 2.5% risk, which means 5%, right? That's where the 5% calculation came from. Now let me tell you what actually happened to Bounce. There has been an article circulating for the last few months that Bounce's vehicles are stranded in Hyderabad and they have just been dumped, right? The reality is, and while for confidentiality reasons can't share the name of the company, all of those vehicles have been purchased by another company. Okay? Every single one of them has been purchased and is being redeployed. Bounce has got not 100% of the value, but a significant percent of value of those assets, which is our core premise, right? And we are not involved in this transaction. We just know of this transaction. But those assets have actually been redeployed and Bounce has got value for them. They're not lying stranded. They're not a loss of value for them, for whoever invested behind it. Okay? But this is how a worst case scenario could play out in a situation. Coming to Bounce, we have not had a challenge with them. They continue to have cash on the balance sheet. They continue to be able to, the business is struggling because of COVID. Mobility trips are low, but because of their position financially, they continue to be healthy as per the best of our information, and we have not had any challenge with respect to that. Does that answer the question?
Nivedan, I can't see him. I'm assuming he is muted. Nivedan, I just sent you a request to unmute yourself.
Yes,
Have a
yes.
counter?
I did not have access to that. But that answered my question very well. I think this is exactly what I wanted to understand at the time. I'm sure it's useful for other people as well. But this gives me immense confidence and clarity that, you know, the actual risk that we're dealing with as a portfolio is definitely very low. Thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Thank you,
No, thank you
Nivedan.
for asking. I think that was a great question and really helped clarify a lot of things.
Yeah, Nikhil, Gaurav, you guys want to take on a few more questions? I see 2 raised hands and a few questions in the Q&A section. And
So Rishabh, let's take last 3 in the interest of time. Okay, I'm picking the one from Kailash is already posted. Although I know this question is more relevant for individual loans and more B2C world, but I'll let Nikhil answer the question. The question is, Nikhil, is around moratorium, RBI-led moratorium, and what happens if in case that happens?
Got it. Once again, because we are not a loan transaction, right? The RBI moratorium does not apply to our transactions. Okay? We are, what is the lease expense is actually an operating expense. It sits as a P&L item on the balance sheet and not a principal repayment. It's on the balance sheet from a loan perspective. And hence the RBI moratorium does not apply to these transactions. That said, so while the RBI moratorium is one aspect, I always want to, I'm trying to give you more reasons to understand the risk. Is it possible that some company will come to us and say, guys, we can't pay you these amount for the next 2 months. Okay, we are stuck financially. Can we delay this? Can you create some kind of buffer for us? And I'm sure we'll have those conversations, right? We're fortunate that till today, no one has asked of this. Again, because we've chosen the companies with a diligent process. Majority of them do not have an impact of COVID. And third is that the assets are revenue generating. So for those reasons, we've not had the situation, but it may absolutely happen. And we will have a conversation with those companies at that point of time.
Okay, excellent. So I can see 2 hand raise, and one is from Manish. And Manish, I think I've asked a question on your bar, but I'm happy to. But Rishabh, if you can unmute, or Ashish, if you can unmute Manish if he has any question.
Manish, I sent you a request. Please unmute and you can then ask your question.
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes.
Hi, Manish.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, hi. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, can I?
Yes,
yeah,
you are.
Can I go? Yeah. So this is well, maybe to Grip also, but Cube also in general. And also the model which they have explained, it's very nice and everything. The returns obviously are very good. But that coming to the non-traditional investment, it should be less than 10%, around 10% of the portfolio. Now, the question is more for the for the Q people, whether as an investor, I'm much safer to invest a larger chunk in things like Grip vis-a-vis other traditional products at this point of time.
Manish, I'm more than happy to take your question offline as well in the interest of Grip team being here. However, I'll answer still 2 parts of the question, and Barun can deep dive it on a 1-to-1 basis a lot more. One is the asset allocation or the what percentage of your wallet should go into alternative assets. As Nikhil mentioned, broadly we are seeing 10 to 20% getting there. Now, as Cube, what we try to do is we try to obviously curate alternative assets from variety of alternative options out there. Trust me, and I'm glad Nikhil pointed out the point about we started actually the chat with Nikhil last September, and you can imagine we integrated in April. So there's a lot which happens behind the scene in terms of due diligence, understanding the processes, etc. The second part of the question, I would not recommend you that. I indeed very personally believe that we shouldn't change our asset allocations based on the, basically we shouldn't time the market. That's my general philosophy I follow. You should stick to indicative percentage of allocation to alternatives. It could be the split between asset leasing and the couple of other P2P options, for example, we provide, or any other option if you have, for example. And rest of the allocation, I'm sure you must have got the perfect portfolio build from our team, and you should just continue that.
Okay. Okay. And because these look very delicious and
I know.
So now, so then we because now with the I lost. I mean, with the Franklin Templeton, I was stuck, and things go bad on the equity side.
Yeah.
So, as an investor, do we change with time, or do we stick to the rigid rules?
So broadly, see, we do change little bit, right? We shouldn't. And again, you are right. It sounds too delicious, but at the end of the day, we have to stick to certain rules. Otherwise, what happens is that you again try to time to say, the markets are very are probably at peak, and I should put all my allocation into, let's say, asset leasing. And I'm telling this even though Nikhil is there, and Nikhil will tell you the same. He's still asking you for 20% of the wallet, not 100% of the wallet. And he knows that that's how it should happen, because that's how the diversification, thumb rule of diversification comes into picture. And that's the role, at least on Cube behalf, we try to play very rigidly. Wherever possible, we try to guide you, hence actually the term called wealth coach. We want these coaches to help you to guide, to build a perfect portfolio, to keep you on the track to build a diversified portfolio, even within the diversification, as you can imagine, not just the asset diversification. Nikhil was very kind to agree to other terms, which we asked them for 10 deals, even though you can buy one deal on Grip, right? And website.
Yeah.
But we say,
and this 5 to 7% probable worst case scenario, is it loss to the capital, or is it loss to the return plus capital?
No, this is
Hello.
Yeah, Nikhil.
Can you hear me?
It's little.
We can hear you. There's a little disturbance, but you're back.
I'm talking about loss to the capital, because loss to the returns would be even, and it also depends on at what time the default happens. In the example that we discussed earlier.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, thanks. And I think we are done with the questions, Nikhil. To be honest, I just have the one. I'll not say a question. It's more a request, and I'll take from the anonymous attendee later. Somebody wants to buy the assets, if in case you allow them to buy the assets, if it's possible. But yeah, I'm sure you will do that.
It's a very interesting option.
Yeah.
One of the this is a very side note, and just because I think your users will understand what I think it's sophisticated, right? They're very excited, and you and I spoke about doing art as an asset, right? We're very excited about trying to lease art, and in that case, if we could create the ability for a user to purchase it for their homes, for their offices, I think that would be incredibly exciting. And it's something that we are working on, and maybe we can try a pilot soon.
Sure. Okay, thanks. Rishabh, over to you.
Yeah. So guys, I think with that we'll kind of come to the end of our session. I hope this session was insightful. And before you guys leave, right, to add to what Manish said, I know this already sounds delicious in his words, but I just want to tell you guys that we've actually reduced the minimum investment amount for asset leasing by Grip on Cube. So instead of 1 lakh, you can do a minimum investment to rupees 50,000, and this is going to be there for the next 15 days. So yeah, just wanted to share that with you. And thank you once again for joining us on this wonderful day, and have a great weekend.